This is a common mistake. It's one of the most common mistakes that I see in carpentry, and it's one that, I'll admit, I even make on a regular basis. So what was it? What did I do wrong here? Most people think that driving a nail, or a screw for that matter, starts and ends with getting the fastener into the board. But that's really just the beginning of the story. One subtle technique can often determine whether or not that fastener stays in and does its job, or eventually fails over time. Today I'm going to discuss what that simple technique is, how to do it, and why it works so effectively. And that's coming up next on the Honest Carpenter Show. So pretty much everyone tends to drive nails and screws straight in. I mean, that's just how it's supposed to go, right? You stand it up perpendicular to your piece, drive straight down, and keep it in line for the full depth. That's a well-sunk fastener, and there's nothing inherently wrong with that. But the problem is, you're sacrificing strength when you do it this way. Why? Because the fastener entered the board by the most direct route possible, straight in. So you have to consider that it can also leave by the most direct route possible, straight out. This is especially problematic for nails because nails are held in by friction. They force their way into the material and they gain their fastening power from that material squeezing them from all sides. But that friction bond can loosen up over time. And the moment it lets go, nearly all the fastening power of that nail is gone. You see this all the time in deck boards. Seasonal changes cause deck lumber to expand and contract, gradually prying nails up out of the board. The friction bond gets broken. Now, no matter how often you drive that nail back down, it won't hold. There's just no squeeze around the fastener. Screws are a little better at handling this problem because they don't rely on friction. Instead, the threads of the screw actually grip the wood by cutting grooves into it. This is why screws don't pull out nearly as often. They have drastically more holding power than nails. And yet, even screws aren't tapping their full potential when they're driven straight in. Their fastening power could still be improved upon. So how can you make every connection with every fastener more powerful? It all comes down to one simple technique. Angle the fastener. That's it. Just put a small angle on your fastener when you send it in. I don't care whether you're driving a screw with an impact driver, hand driving a trim nail, or firing sinkers with a nail gun. The connection you form will almost always gain strength when you angle the fastener a bit. So why is this? Basically, when you do this, you've made it more difficult for the fastener to pull out. When you drive a nail at an angle, it traverses diagonally through both boards. If you try to pull those boards apart, you won't be able to pull straight out. Instead, you'll have to really pry the board to remove the nail. That's because it's no longer just being held in with friction. All this material above the angle is also locking it into place. So you have to plow up that material to get the fastener free. You could theoretically still back the fastener out by pulling at the same angle that the nail went in. That works. But you can counteract this effect by angling the fastener against the force that it's most likely to get pulled at. For instance, if you're hanging something against a wall, gravity is the main force working against it. So you would angle your nail point downwards. Now gravity has to pry the fastener against the angle and against all that extra material holding it in. And in many cases, you can really magnify this effect by driving two nails at opposite angles. Say you're experiencing spring force, where a bowed object doesn't want to stay flat, but you want to nail it down tight. You can shoot one fastener slightly angled to the left, then one fastener nearby slightly angled to the right. Now the two of them are creating a scissor effect, counteracting force from a variety of directions. Trim carpenters do this all the time when they're nailing stubborn trim to a bowed wall. We generally call this toe nailing, and that word just refers to setting any fastener at a slight angle. Most people think that toe nailing just refers to angle nailing two boards at 90 degrees to one another, like when you're framing studs from the top side. But that's only one definition for toe nailing. In carpentry, we tend to use it more ubiquitously, and that's why I think of this whole thing as the toenail effect. Now, how much angle do you have to put on a fastener to create this effect? It's not terribly specific, but generally about 10 to 15 degrees will do it. Any more than that, and you're sacrificing penetration and creating too much lateral traverse. The fastener is too shallow. You want it to dig in a little more. And as I said, screws can also benefit from toe nailing. It's especially important when you're screwing into end grain. I mentioned in my video about screw length that end grain doesn't hold fasteners well. But if you put a slight angle on a screw, it'll bite laterally through more end grain and create more holding power. That said, screws are so strong already, you don't have to toe nail with them in every occasion. You can often drive them straight in and it'll be just fine, like when you're hanging drywall. Also, toe nailing with a screw can sometimes cause the head to dish or tilt drastically at the surface. This can look ugly and make it hard to countersink, so some people avoid it for this reason. But nails, especially trim nails, can almost always benefit from a slight toenail angle. It makes them much, much stronger. Just don't angle them so much that they skip off the surface of a workpiece. Again, 10 or 15 degrees will do the trick. What did you think of this video? Was it helpful? Any questions? Do you have any advice on toenailing effectively and when you like to use it? Let me hear about it down in the comments. I'll link a few tools and materials seen from the video down in the description. Feel free to shop those links, and remember that we receive a tiny commission at no extra charge to you. As always, thanks for watching. Be sure to check back in for more videos coming up soon, and please consider subscribing and hitting that little bell button to turn on notifications. That way you'll know the moment we post something. I'm Ethan James with TheHonestCarpenter.com. I'll see you next time.